Hi there, welcome back to Diagonal Move. Today we're doing a component overview video of Salerno 43, a video with all the goodness of an unboxing but with less cellophane unwrapping. So Salerno 43 is the latest in a series of games designed by Mark Simonich and published by GMT. Others in the series include Holland 44, Ardennes 44, Stalingrad 42, Normandy 44 and many others. I don't recall every single one in the series as I've never actually played one. I do own Normandy 44, but that game is currently sat on my shelf of opportunity and has been for some time. But nevertheless, we do have Salerno 43 because I noticed that this is about the Allied invasion of Italy in September 1943, and it's the only game on this topic I currently have, and I thought it would be worthwhile getting a copy while I can. So the game is in a fairly sturdy GMT box. It is quite nicely illustrated there by someone called Marcos Filarola, and it features tanks in mid-combat. I will leave others to determine how historically accurate that representation is of a tank there. Not my area of expertise, that particular one. Quite a thin box. Is it 1-inch box? I think. I'm not sure. Definitely not one of their bigger boxes. So we have a little bit of blurb on the back of the box saying that Salerno 43 is battalion, regiment, brigade level game on the Allied invasion of mainland Italy in September of 43. 2 British and 2 American divisions land in the Gulf of Salerno, defended by the full-strength 16 Panzer divisions. That is reinforced fairly soon by the 1st Volksschmerge. And the battle follows, which eventually, of course, leads to the remainder of the invasion of Italy and the retaking of Italy over the next few years or so by the Allies against the Italians and the Germans. The game itself has 2 scenarios, an 8-turn invasion scenario and a full 22-turn campaign. Contents-wise, we have maps, counter sheets, rulebooks and so on. It does say there are 2 6-sided dice, however I did only get 1 in my box. A little spoiler there for the rest of the video, but I'm sure we can forgive the absence of 1 die. We will have hundreds of them at home, I'm sure. In terms of playtime and so on, you have a 2 to 6 hour game for 2 players. Complexity is 5 and solitaire suitability is also 5. Okay, right, enough looking at the box. Let's take a look at what's inside. We do have that die just on its own. I'll have to find out if that is a typo or if there is a missing component. I'm not sure at the moment. Rulebook, nice sort of letter-sized rulebook, containing everything you need to know and to play, I'm sure, until they publish an errata, possibly. But for now, we'll take it as everything you need is in here. Lots and lots and lots of text, a few pictures, which is good. I'm sure regular viewers will know I have a slightly dim view on rulebooks that are excessively text heavy. However, I was recently pleasantly surprised by a game with a terribly text heavy rulebook that turned out to be really rather good. So we'll give this one the benefit of the doubt, but there are lots and lots of dense text there. Although some of these illustrations do look quite useful. In the corner there we have what looks like advance during combat or something similar, partial success in a city battle marker, part of the determined defence rules, it seems. Okay, cool. Examples of retreat and so on. Fairly typical GMT rulebook with everything nicely indexed. Rules 13.1, 13.11, 13.112 and so on. So plenty there to cross-reference, and I think on the back of the book there is actually an index to help you find the right paragraph as you go through the rule learning process. I may have sounded a bit down on text-heavy rules, but I do find GMT's rulebooks, even though they are quite dense, they do have this nice referencing of certain rules, which is very, very helpful. Everything in here that you would expect for a game of this nature and this series. It does look very similar to the Normandy 44 rulebook, if I remember correctly. I haven't actually learnt that game yet, but certainly superficially there is a great many similarities. So I expect if you've played others in this series, you'll probably pick this up quite well. So we are on page 22 and we've come across the scenarios as well as some optional rules and some special rules for turn number 1. The scenario is Avalanche. It's a short scenario, just 8 turns, and you use a start card to set up. Then you have the campaign game, which begins actually the same as the Avalanche scenario, but with a number of extra rules, as you might expect. There are some hints on play for both sides, plus various designer notes and the usual expected large example of play there at the back of the book. Okay, cool. So far, so fairly GMT, up to the usual standard it seems there for that GMT rulebook. We also have more dense small typing on shiny paper. This is the player aid. It's a CRT odds-based game, as I'm sure many of you will be familiar with, but we do have a few other tables dotted around as well, descriptions of what the modifiers mean. On the inside we have the phases, the sequence of play, a summary of mountainside hex effects. Okay, that's interesting. And quite an entire green box about what happens in mountainside terrain. That's interesting. And then further information here: invasion CRTs, airborne drop tables, unit type, references for special rules and so on. And then coordination between the US and Commonwealth, I'm assuming that's EW is. And then various abbreviations found in combat unit IDs. And on the back we have the terrain effects chart itself. Again, quite a detailed game this looks like to me. That may be my inexperience with this series showing there, but for a game which I think is slightly smaller than some of the others in the series, it certainly seems quite a lot in it in terms of its detail, which is going to be really cool. Exact identical copy of the player aid there, so one for each player. Now we have the counter sheet, just the one counter sheet, so I do think this is a much smaller game than is typical for the series. In fact, I think it's less counters than Normandy 44. I'm not sure. I'd have to go and have a look at that box, but certainly there are less counters here than I've seen in many games recently. The symbology on there is a mix of the NATO symbols and images of tanks and so on. We do have various airborne units, it looks like, as well as armoured and mechanised. A few tokens down here, the Valiant and Warspite, I assume that's something to do with the Navy invasion. We have markers for airborne aircraft units, as well as disrupted and out of supply, I'm assuming those units there. Okay, cool. The usual, oops, I've just punched my way straight through the counter there, but the usual fairly thick GMT counter here, and it did punch out really easily. On the back there we have a few units that are double-sided, plus many of the reverse sides of the counters there are slightly different to their front sides. All what you'd expect really in a game of this nature, and looking very cool indeed. Setup cards for both sides. We have the Allied campaign and Avalanche scenario setup. You get start along the top there, and then follow-up waves, floating reserves, remnants, and then turns 5, 6, 7, and so on, all the way through to turn 20. Reinforcements arriving via sea transport, except those listed as airdrops. And then we have scenario 1.4, optional start. Okay, this might be something to vary setup, it seems, possibly. Yeah, varying optional element to the setup there, it seems. although I'm not quite sure on a superficial look what the differences are, but I'm sure we'll have to figure that out as we go when we play the game. Another card here for the Axis player, just one-sided. Far fewer forces, it seems, than the Allied. Okay, and finally on to what is quite possibly my favourite part of any review of components, and that is a look at the map. And this is a relatively small map. It's paper, so you need your plexiglass on the top of that. But we have everything you could possibly want on here. We have the turn track with the various reinforcements and weather phases, end of short scenario notes and so on there. The map key, sequence of play here, various available units of navy and air types, eliminated floating reserves, remnants track at the top there, and then we have the map itself. I often say this about games, but a good map when you're playing a war game, particularly if you're playing solo like I do, makes all the difference. And when you have a map that looks as clear and quick to see as this one is, it's only the second time or so I've actually looked at this map, but you can see straight away where are the mountains, where's the terrain and for the rivers and the roads. You know, it's really easy to see straight away, and that's really cool. The hexes are on the smaller side, but I think that's just representative of the game, because the counters are reasonably small. Let's try and pop out a yellow tank there. We have a yellow tank, made to fit fairly nicely there on the hexes, which is cool. Very little clear terrain. It does seem to be very mountainous, so that must be where all that detail regarding the mountains comes in. There's obviously something quite unique about the mountains and the hilly terrain. Of course, it was a very hilly part of Italy that the Allies had to fight their way through during the war itself. Okay, very nice stuff indeed. We have a few hexes with markers on them, like 1s and 2s and so on. Must be something to do with start locations or VPs or something. We'll look into that when I do the inevitable overview of how to play the game in due course. Okay, that is it for this particular video. If you found it useful, please do click like, subscribe, comment. Every little thing you can do to support the channel helps, and I will see you next time.